Hello, I'm Mikael. Isn't that a boring introduction? I was thinking doing something like Adam Cronauer, like, good morning Vietnam, but we're not in Vietnam, and good morning, the little swamp that accidentally happened to have an airfield between Stockholm and Uppsala doesn't have a nice ring to it. And it's not even morning. So you have to settle with, hello, I'm Mikael. Good, huh? So we're going to talk about the log. I have to say I'm a bit lying in the title, because we're going to talk some more things than the log. Not only the log, but the log and things around the log that makes the log important and that gives you the reason to keep your log safe and gives you the means to see when you haven't. And to help doing this, I need a developer. Oh, right? Are there any developers here? Some? Okay. You know who to look at when I tell you the bad boys does this? Because the developer, they do like this. Create a database, yeah, and we have a database. A really small database, and it's almost default options. Everybody might know the default options for the database, but I'm going to show you anyway. We have specifically full recovery mode. That means the log is important. SQL is going to guard your log with its life. So the developer starts working, and since I don't have a developer beside me, as some of my presenter colleagues did, I scripted a developer. I scripted a developer that actually creates a table. And you see the log usage immediately. When you create the system tables, you have a log usage of about 20%. What is that for? Well, that is the log creating all the system tables, inserting rows about what's in the log. And then the user starts to do stuff. And this is only to fake. This is no real data. You could guess, right? It inserts a date time, and then it gets the date time back, so we can see the last date time accepted. And you see the log usage is increasing. The developer gets some coffee and gets a bit quicker. You see what's happening in the log. The SQL server is running this, and it's writing to the log sequentially. So how many log files can you have? That is a question. Many. That is correct. It's like 16. Why do you need many log files? You don't? No, if you do the many log files trick, then you're in trouble. Because then you have many things that you don't need to keep track of to get the one thing you need to work. And to prove that, the log here is divided into 4 virtual log files. So this only file I have is actually 4 files inside the file. And right about now, the active part of my work jumped between log files like this. And we are coming up to the magical moment. The file is full. What will happen now? Default, it will grow. Yes, because the server, okay. Because the server says that it will always keep your transaction log, and default, it will grow. Every admin knows that. So the file is, okay, 47, 48, 2 megabytes log file. And we wait for it, and it will grow. You know, this is a developer doing this. They have no clue that this file will grow. They have no clue. So the file, it's jumping to the last portion. Wasn't it close to... Did I already take my first full backup? What do you think? I'm a developer.
So that's why they can run. Doesn't it act like in a simple recovery mode?
Doesn't it act like in simple recovery mode? Yes, of course. Because when SQL Server finds somebody is using a database with a transaction log that has never been backed up, SQL Server realizes you don't know what you're doing, you probably don't want your data, so it's starting to reuse the transaction log over and over again. And since it's reusing the stuff, it must know where in this virtual log file it is, right? And we have some special commands. For instance, this command, dbcc log info. That gives you the virtual log files. This is actually the information about the transaction log. So you see, I've got 4 parts of the transaction log file. 4 parts, and we have a bit that is a bit blurry. A column here that says parity. Luckily, it isn't that blurry, so you can see it's 64, 64, 64, and 128. Everything is 64. And then it went over to the next 4th, and it keeps track all the time, where am I? By flipping this bit, so it can keep track of where am I, what is the active part, and what is the 3 inactive parts. That is good, right? And now we have the problem. My developer buddy, you know the guy next door, thinks this database is cool. It's one table with a date time, but I need it. So, we do it. We give him a copy, like that. Did you notice that the log shrank? The log usage went down because taking a backup resets and informs SQL, okay, good. You're going to guard the transaction log with your life. This is when it starts. And what is starting? Well, our problem starts. We could maybe simulate some stuff, like a couple of users doing row inserts. You see the row count here? There are many users, and the transaction log, it grows. It grows until it gets to 295 megabytes, and then it empties itself, right? No. Okay, so how long does it grow? Full stop. A better word for that is infinitely. And sadly, we don't have that amount of time to wait, so I'm just going to show you this. You see the growth, default options, and it's 151 virtual log files. So, now, a bit of math. One of my customers, they called me and said, our server, it stops. Like every 3 weeks, it stops, and it's totally dead for 20 minutes. And we're estimating that sometime during next Thursday, it's the next time. Could you please come? And I said, yeah, sure. And I went into their database and looked at space usage, table usage, 500 megabytes data, and everything was good. And then a guy came. No, it stopped. It stopped. Because it was growing the transaction log by 10%. From 93 gigabytes. No wonder it stopped for 20 minutes, just doing nothing but giving more transaction log, 500 megs of data, and after the growth, over 100 gigabytes of transaction log. But that is not the biggest problem. Do you know what it is? The number of VLFs. Because to find out, okay, where was the last VLF I was active in? It must look through those. So when they restarted the server the last time, it took 3.5 days to read the transaction log, to find the actual active VLF, and a downtime of 3.5 days in a production industry, that could cost you something.
How many VLFs were those?
We actually didn't have time to count, but imagine growing 10% from 1 megabyte up to 93 gigabytes, giving at least 1 and up to 16 VLFs per growth. It was a lot. So, what do we need? We need to kill this database again and recreate it. And now my developer gets sad, of course. So I need to make the developer happy again. So, look at the log. At the time of backup, the log gets truncated. Yes, that's correct. I told you. At the time of the backup, the full backup, the log got truncated. Once. Because I did job, and I have never, ever, ever taken a backup before, and the things done before the backup are considered useless. Therefore, at the first time ever you do a backup, you can see that the log seems to be truncated. But the log never gets truncated unless you take a backup of the transaction log. See? Backup log. No. You can name the files monkey in the end if you want. But the problem is SQL does only see BAK and TRN. So, here is my database statistics, my database information. And you see the database is happy, full recovery mode, and nothing. Does anybody see the name of the column? What does it say? Log reuse weight description. And this database is not waiting for anything to reuse the transaction log. Well, the developer did some work. So, what's happening now? The transaction log is growing. 10%, you see, it goes down to 90. And it could have been reusing those 2 megabytes, but it didn't do it because of log backup. This is good. Reuse because of log backup is good, because what do you do to reuse the transaction log? Backup of the log, of the database? No. Differential backup? No. Only the log. And it says here, log backup. The bad thing is when this one little dude says active transaction, right? Because then you have an active transaction that prevents the log from clearing. And you might have a problem somewhere. And it's beyond the scope of this session to dig into those problems. But there can be more issues with this. And of course, my developer friends. You can get rid of the problem with the log by putting the database in simple recovery mode. I actually did those quote signs, you saw them? Discrete, but quote signs. Because I went to an installation, scary installation. This is the economy system of the economy system. I won't name the names, but the guy who came and installed the system, he installed the SQL database, and then he put the SA, and he overrode the blank password warning, and then he said, and then we're going to put your database with your financial data in simple recovery mode, because then you won't have problems with your log. And I asked, what? And then he said, oh, but by the way, we're taking backups as well. Once a week, we'll set up your backups to run. Okay, serious consulting business. We're setting up the financial system with one backup a week and no way to recover from anything else, because you don't want the problem with the log. But this works. And the log gets truncated. So now that was correct actually. The behavior default with no backups is exactly the same as this simple behavior. So that's the danger, because you see the database behaving like simple mode, but it's actually in full. And if you by accident take a backup, then the log starts to grow and you don't know why. The boring thing here is the transaction log in simple recovery mode isn't a fixed size. Here I'm actually doing nothing. I'm updating all the rows, and I'm deleting all the rows, and I'm rolling the rows back again. And the transaction log size went from 6 to 14 megabytes. And the usage, well, it got bigger, but it's getting reused in due time. Anybody knows why the transaction log grows in simple recovery mode? Why does it grow? Yeah? It must log the whole transaction. There are no concept that simple recovery mode doesn't log things. It logs things because it must do everything or nothing. But then when it has done everything or nothing, it can throw it away. But it must keep this during the entire time of the transaction. So that's why active transactions also in simple recovery mode can prevent you from reusing your transaction log. This misconception that you must have, or you can have, multiple log files is wrong, because there is only one active part of the transaction log at the same time. So if you think that, oh, multiple files, this improves my performance. Yes, that's true. In the database file section. But in the transaction log file, you will actually have multiple transaction log files, one active, with one active part, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 inactive, not needed files. And that makes more complexity when you're trying to restore. So try to use only one log file. You see this? The database started to grow. So, now I'm going to start to show the recoverability with transaction logs. How you're going to recover, how you're going to do, if you actually are using the database in a correct way. Or correct way, in the way the developer maybe can do. I'm setting the recovery model full, and to be sure, I'm deleting all backup history. This backup history, we have a small script here. That is actually from MSDB with backup sets and media families to show you that we have no backup history whatsoever. So, backup database, and this is actually a script I downloaded from Google that says this is how to do. I replaced this because you shouldn't have, it was actually H colon before, but I replaced it. But otherwise it's Google script downloads, because Google is the source of every good thing you have, right? You don't have to be smart to write things that show up on Google. That's kind of proved. But you have to be, well, you don't have to be smart to use things from Google either. So I do this backup, and well, we can look at the backup history. Look here. You see, I've got backup set 26, that is my backup set, and this is my full backup, and you see even the path where it is and the type D, database backup. And then I have a log backup, and wow, my backup agent is so happy because it shows me this. And oh, backup log again to truncate the transaction log one last time. And then, yeah, why not? This is also a command I found on Google, restore database. It was in the same sample, so I'm just using it. Restore database, restore log, and duo. One good thing with this is that it shows that my application developer works. He remembers the last good insert. You see, it's getting gray, and it was the last good row. But what has actually happened now? Oh, the thing that happened was that I trusted Google a bit too much. And even though my backups say that they are good, this is only backup table history stuff. These aren't the real backups. So I think I need some kind of kind of explanation from one of you guys. Don't use init. That's the solution. But what's the explanation here? It's expecting some kind of LSN.
You broke the log chain.
I broke the log chain. Yeah. It expects an earlier log that includes 216 something. Okay, I'm getting almost the entire error number here. Here. The full database backup. It says, explanation. It begins with log sequence number 13 something, and it ends at 216. That is the reset point for my transaction log. Proof? Yes. 33, 13 something, the same as the full backup. That is my starting point for the log. And then we go to the last LSN, 245. That is the one I got in the error. You are trying to, yeah, I am. Row 28. I am trying to insert the row from log 28 instead of log 27 that was expected. And the cause and, well, the solution as well was my backup used init. And the strange thing is, backup database with init, that is correct. I should clear that thing. And this one, backup log to this one with init, that could be correct also, because that clears the file for new log chains. But the last one, this is where I messed up. Log set 2, also with init, means that this backup erased all information from this backup. And I hope you have tried this. Restore header only. This actually doesn't go into the system tables, it doesn't go into the history, and look, this one goes into the backup file, backup device, and sees, this is what I think is on the device. The full backup, this is my full backup, backup type 1, and if we go a bit further out, we're going to see some potential problems with the backups. The database version. Could be a good idea to know the patching version of your SQL compared to the backup version. But here, the first backup ever and the log sequence numbers. And then I go to my log backups. And I find this is only one backup, and we are actually missing the log sequence number somewhere between here. Okay. I was thinking about fixing this, doing it the right way so we can see. Initialize database and start to do backups. Delete backup history so we are fresh, and do exactly the same again with init and backup log with init. And this is where I messed up, so I'm actually very, very obvious writing no init here, but no init is the default, so I could have written nothing instead. So this one is now going to work. And just to show another little thing, because you know what happens in the log? When I do the work here, things get written to the log with no file cache. Get written to the log sequentially all the time, and they get written to the database when the SQL server decides to do that. There is a number called recovery interval, and as somebody quoted yesterday, in a galaxy far, far away, that number actually means something. But right now it's a number at about 5 something. And in about 5 something, the SQL server will do a checkpoint, and I'm going to be in the right database for this. It's going to do a checkpoint, and that is actually writing down all the dirty pages, the things that has happened since last time, to the database as well. And, well, the log, it's always written to. This history is obviously the same, so I'm going to only look at this. This is my full backup, and this is my log backup, and we see the important things here. Database backup LSN 109207. It is the first LSN of the database backup. Therefore, you can conclude these logs belong to the same database backup. That's a good thing. So you know you can use these logs to add up or append to the backups. First LSN is almost exactly actually matching the last LSN of the next or the previous transaction log. So we have this log chain that is really, really good. Do you think I can restore my database right now to the last possible moment? But I have backups. I Google it, restore my database from backups, and it says like this, restore database, and it says restore log, log, and log. And I'm doing this. Yes, I could. I could restore the database. Good, huh? You're not doing this.
No.
You're doing this.
About the tail backup. You were doing this.
Yeah, I was. And notice that my strange application, the restore went so fast so it didn't get an error, it's still continuing. But now I got a big lag. What I did between the last log backup and when I restored is missing. And that is a big, big, big problem. And in the previous versions, the nice old SQL versions, this was actually the thing you did. You didn't have a warning, you didn't have anything. But Google, my infinite good friend, showed me how to replace the database without problems with error messages about tails and stuff you don't know about. So I actually efficiently erased all my customers' data since the last log backup. That was successful. Important to know. Hopefully you know the recovery syntax with the file 1, 2, 3 and like that. Any questions so far? Total silence. Everybody knows. So, I'm going to do this. No?
I've got one question.
Yeah.
What happens if the database is larger than the small one? Let's say it takes 10 minutes to run your recovery. Can the user work? So this time or
No. The user can't work because we can see here, when I do this command, actually the first thing that happens is I have to restore the database. And if the database is very big, the database rests somewhere here and waiting for my next command or waiting for my next command to complete. And the database then is in the status restoring, unavailable to users. So my application has a 10-second timeout before it discovers that something is wrong. So that's why I could continue work. Okay. Next log restored, still in restoring, and it's not until I do the last restore with recovery that it says, okay, you can get into the database now.
if you're unsure about if you're going to take more log files, if you're moving a system, you could put it in no recovery. And then you can do a restore log without a file with recovery, and you'll get it online.
Yeah. So the importance is if you don't know, you're moving a system and it takes a very long time, you can actually do like this. Notice I have with no recovery even on the last one, like this. And this one has restored all of my current logs. And the database is still in the twilight zone. It's waiting for more stuff, but sadly no more stuff is coming. So I can only do restore log SQL rally. and then it processes the things it's got and lets people in. But I have a question for you then. What if you're unsure that you have recovered as long as you need? The evil user dilemma. My last transaction log, was it as far as I could restore?
Is there a third option where you can look into the database and still restore more files?
Good question. You could almost think I asked you to ask this. Yes, of course it is. No recovery doesn't let you get into the database, because no recovery, it just pastes the transaction log sequence number after log sequence number. Recovery does the same thing, pasting log sequence number, and then when it comes to the last log sequence number, it says, okay, fine, checkpoint. And you notice the checkpoint got its own number. So when you try to continue the transaction logs, the checkpoints ruin it for you. So you can't append more transaction logs after checking the database if it's good. So, as the gentleman here stated, there must be a third option. And the third option is with, I want to check in the database, but I want to throw the checkpoint away after. And I wouldn't be surprised if the command was that, with I want to check in the database, but they called it instead with standby. So I can write like this. With standby equals, and then this is the checkpoint. Check. I should spell right. So I restore the database, and still no standby mode. The database is restoring, and the last one, I do a standby. And you see the database is in standby, read-only mode. You can go into the tables, you can check the values, you can even go a bit further, append the next transaction log, because this standby file gets trashed as soon as you do any other restore command.
Cool.
And did you know when you have the transaction logs, you could even stop wherever you like? It's just adding with stop at. And then you specify the date and time. And then you get the transaction log to play to the log sequence number at that time. And then you do recovery, and then you're good. You have eliminated that user's transaction. Yes?
Or you can even do a mark. You can mark the log.
Yeah. You can also name transactions. So if you write something like this, begin transaction Nisse, then you have a transaction with a name, then you can say stop at mark. Then you stop at the transaction named Nisse.
I thought it was select star from blah blah with mark.
Begin transaction with mark. So you name the transaction, then you set a mark. But that's stupid. That's so stupid, because okay, I'm going to do a thing that is very dangerous and it can fail, so I mark this transaction. And then I can restore everything, including this transaction that failed. Good. No, not so good. So that's why we also have the command stop before mark. So you can actually mark potentially dangerous work as potentially dangerous, and then you can restore and say stop before mark, and then you cut everything after that.
Potentially dangerous, I test it first.
You test it by taking a backup.
Until it's not dangerous anymore.
Yeah.
And then I do it.
You don't know how many people doing dangerous stuff without backups even.
I know.
So we have the standby, we have the stop at mark, stop before mark. And I think we must look into I now wrecked my database. We must look into another thing with this. And it's not in this file. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. No. I ran too much restores, so I ruined this demonstration. So, we've seen this demo also, the backup chains, the log backup stuff, how backups work. But now, the really important thing is, how important is the log? How important is it? Yeah. It is, you have to have it. It won't work without the transaction log, no.
We still have the database.
We still have the database, we still have the data file, yeah, sure. I'm just going to do a quick database here. Test data. And, well, we have this, the full recovery mode, the default, and we have the simple recovery mode. And you notice there was only two options, right? The full and the simple. No, it was another one. And what is that? Bulk logged. But since I don't know what that is, and I'm scared of the small black box that makes me run BCP, this one is worthless, right? For you, apparently. Ah, taunting, taunting. No, but this can be good. But what can it be good for? Well, it turns off the logging. Bad rumor again. This one, this flag, bulk logged, turns off the logging. So you don't log things. That is good. The interesting thing is that you don't turn off the logging. You just log a bit less when you do certain operation like bulk insert. Bulk insert is one of them, and certain other operations make unlogged or minimally logged operations. So, what I've told you before, everything gets in the log and you can restore everything with the help of the log, and then you turn off when you turn off parts of the log. So you actually got a table where you insert, like a good developer, insert 1 million rows, and then you bulk in 500,000 rows, and then you restore, and then you get your 1 million rows that you logged. But you lose the 500,000 that are non-logged. Is that correct? No. Because this one actually makes the log backup it's getting a bit strange. The log backup doesn't now take the log things and clear the log only. It takes the log and looks, oh, here I have a notice that this was minimally logged and it affected this page. So it takes the entire 8K page and adds to the log. So when you are in bulk logged mode, you have actually database backups with data pages, and you have log backups with log and data pages. So you're only actually delaying the time it takes to do stuff with log-related things. You're delaying the real work until you do the backup. And it's equally always important to have the transaction log. And you said, but you always have the database. Yeah. I tried really hard. I tried really hard to get the guys at Fusion.io to give me a server with a cool memory, but they didn't. I nagged and tried to get them to just, I could borrow it until it was out of market or something, but no. So I had to do it my own way. And my own way is this. I've got a USB drive instead. So let's pretend this is a high-class SAN for my database. Okay? We have to pretend a bit. So this is a high-class SAN for the database, and I'm actually doing this database. You see, I'm doing this on the USB drive, and notice it's the master data file that sits on the USB drive here. And it takes the time. It takes its time. And you should never do that in comments like that. So I'm starting this initialization and do the data stuff. What do you say? Should we insert a lot? You see, I've got a huge transaction log. I will never need to take a backup of this one again. 93 gigabytes. I can work for 6 years without ever having to bother about a backup. Good. So let's try. Some rows. Check. Transaction log increases, and yeah. You see here. This number, even hard to see, is kind of an accurate match to the time here. And I can even delete some stuff here. Whoops, 0. Nice. And yeah, it's continuing to do the stuff. And do you see the USB drive here? Yeah. And whoops, yeah. And we always have the database, right? No, we don't. Sorry, Maiden pulled the plug on the SAN. But as I promised, we have the transaction log, right? We have the transaction log. The interesting thing here is this is continuing inserting. Yeah, it is. And yeah. How much disk is it using? Yeah. It is using disk. Strange.
It's not the right database.
Test data. Good. Oh, let's see. How much disk is it using? This is a severe system level error condition that, oh, scary text, close. Because the application still works. No users are complaining, everybody's happy. Okay. Once every year I've read on Google that you have to run dbcc check db, so I do that. And it says failure, and I read possibly temp db out of space, and then I start my search. No, temp db's got a lot of space. And system table in previous errors, this is the first. So no, this is wrong. My application works, so. Or? No. This is now I'm doing two things at the same time. I'm starting to scream like a little girl and look at a recruiting agency to put out my CV, right? Because I now know something is really, really bad here. Do not restore the database. No. Because when you restore the database, then you have destroyed your only means to get everything back, right? So, we need to backup log, and again, Books Online, a more credible source of real knowledge, says that you have to back up database with no recovery. Yes, database backup with no recovery, because you don't want the database to be accessible when you have done the backup of the log. That command is also called a tail log backup. And to cut the time short, I also added this no truncate, because I know for a fact that when this database log backup tries to truncate the database, it also must write to the missing disk data file that it has truncated the transaction log. So I'm running this command. Remember, screaming like a little girl and screaming more because I have no full backup. I forgot. Interesting, huh? This is the demo daemon, isn't it? A quick fix. Database is gone, USB drive is back online. Sadly, I can't use this USB drive data, so I have to wait for 5 hours. You know, Swedish operating systems are not so fast. The Finnish was much faster. But those you can't understand instead. Okay. Remember, database and recovery and backup. Okay. Good thing I cut the demo short and didn't use the no truncate option as well. So, but I'm gonna anyway cut this short to avoid things. I'm just gonna start the loader and not do anything fancy with it, like this. Okay. It's working, it's running, and again, removing the USB drive. We can actually check for the database usage again. Yeah, same message, good. Or bad, depending on how you look at it. So, just skipping directly to where I was. Backup log. And if you noticed my facial expression, I wasn't very surprised seeing red text, because I was actually expecting red text, but not by the reason you saw before. The operating system returned error 21. The unit is not ready. Disk is not there. Starting to get 120 in pulse and something. Google. Set emergency. Huh? Alter database, set emergency. Yeah! Unable to open the physical. Boom! You see? The database just died for my clients. Now, I can choose between answer the phone and tell all the 1,500 clients that, okay, I'm fixing it, or I can just ignore the phone and fix it. I choose to fix it. So, now my database is in emergency mode. Emergency mode is very good because you can do a lot of stuff, checking, consistency checking, and you can't do the log backup. because the database is in emergency mode. I got a subtle sign that I have 5 minutes left. So, we're going to restore the database set online. We're going to do the database online again because emergency was apparently not so good. And then I got an error message again because the database can't be online because the disk is missing. And so somehow this fiddling with the database status got SQL to realize, okay, I cannot do anything of this, so I better let this dude take the log back up. Okay? So now we have the database, not in emergency, not in offline, not in any kind of strange mode. We have the database waiting for the next restore. And the next restore is, of course, my restore database with move file to the existing new SAN, or my local hard drive for this matter, and restore the transaction log tail I just took. And could you guess that this one, and to be very clear, results in text, makes this and this number exact? We didn't miss one transaction of this. Okay. Cool, huh? And that actually concludes this session with the importance of the transaction log, and I'll be up here to take questions and probably roaming around also for you to know. Good. Thank you.